To start building out our pagination, we can go to a component that's going to use it. That's going to be the movies component. Right below our movie list, we're going to have a pagination component that looks just like this. Of course, we are yet to create it. So inside of the components, let's create a new folder called pagination. Inside of our pagination, we're going to have one new file called pagination.jsx. Our pagination is going to be a React functional component, and inside of there, we're going to import just a few things. We're going to import a typography, and finally, we're going to import the button. That's coming from add MUI material. And finally, we also need styles, so let's just import use styles from /styles, and we can immediately declare them. Const styles is equal to use styles. For now, in here, we can simply say pagination. Of course, we are yet to create these files, so let's do that right away. Inside of the pagination folder, we can create a styles.js file, and we can copy our usual styles right inside of here. With that said, now we have our bare bones pagination component. So let's go inside of the index. Let's export it right here. That's going to be pagination. And finally, inside of the movies, let's use that control space trick to automatically import it. We're gonna do this one and make sure that you import it from .. Now, if we save the file, we should be able to see the pagination in our browser. Let's try by scrolling to the bottom of the page and take a look. Pagination. Right now, it's not doing a lot, it's just a simple piece of text, but we can implement the functionality right now. To implement our functionality, we can go into the pagination component. Inside of here, let's create a div. We already have one, but we're going to give it a class name equal to classes.container. Inside of there, we're going to have a button. That button is going to have a class name equal to classes.button. It's going to be of a variant is equal to contained. So right here, we can say variant is equal to contained. And a color of primary. And finally, we can say type is equal to button. Finally, that button is going to say prev, as in previous. Below that button, we're going to have a typography. And this typography is going to be of a variant is equal to h4. It's going to have a class name, which is going to be equal to classes.pageNumber. And inside of there, we want to show a current page. So right now, I'm going to display it like this, and we can create a dummy variable called const current page is equal to 1. Later on, we're going to make this dynamic. Finally, we can duplicate the button we had above and move it below the typography. That way, we can simply change it to next. So now we have a previous and the next button. Let's go ahead and save it. And finally, we have to implement our classes. In here, I have a typo. This here should have been classes. And we can go inside of styles and implement these three classes. The first one is going to be container. Our classic container that's going to be display is flex. Justify content is going to be center, and align items is also going to be center. Our button is going to have a margin 30 pixels on top and bottom and 2 pixels on left and right. And finally, our page number is going to have a margin 0 on top and bottom and 20 pixels on left and right. And we have to put important right here. Finally, the color is going to be equal to theme.palette.text.primary. And as we've learned, we're getting that theme right here. There we go. We've implemented the styles and the pagination is almost done. Let's go ahead and see how does it look like. If we scroll down, you'll notice that we have previous, next, and then one in the middle. Great. From what I can see, it doesn't seem that the styles are applied. So let's inspect why is there no padding or margin between the buttons and the text. We named our buttons classes .button, and the middle thing is named page number. Right here, page number, and we do have 20 pixels on left and right. But I misspelled important. So right here, if we spell it correctly, now we have some margin in between. Great. But now we have to do just one thing, and that is actually make it work. Implement the functionality. To implement the functionality, we're going to add an on-click listener to each one of these buttons. The first one is going to be handle previous or prev, and the next one is going to be handle next. Then we can simply create those functions right here. Const handle prev, which is a function, and we can basically duplicate that and have the handle next. So now you might be wondering, how are we actually going to implement this? And the answer is we're going to accept some props from the parent component of the pagination component, and that's going to be movies. Inside of here, take a look at this. We already had a page state. So the only thing we have to do is pass the page and set page. So we're going to scroll below and we're going to pass current page to be equal to page, and also set page to be equal to set page. Finally, we also need to pass the number of total pages, and that's hidden in data.total_pages. Great. Now we have access to these three variables inside of the pagination. We can accept our current page, also total pages, and then finally set page. The first thing we want to do is say if total pages is equal to 0. In that case, we don't want to show this component at all, so we can simply return null. We don't need to return the pagination component because there are no pages to paginate over. Now that we have the current page right here, we don't have to hard code it right there. And the only thing we have to do is implement the next page and previous page. And we can do that easily by saying set page. We accept a callback function. In the callback function, we get access to the previous page right here. And then finally, we can do previous page plus 1. That's if we want to increment, but if we want to decrement, that's going to be -1. We can now duplicate this and in here put +1. But there's one more thing we have to consider, is that if we are on the first page, we cannot go to the page 0. That means that we shouldn't go previous if we're on first. Or if we are on the last page, we shouldn't be able to go +1, right? So we have to add some boundaries. The first boundary is going to check if current page is not equal to 1. Only in that case we can go previous. And the boundary for the next, if current page is not equal to, what do you think? Total pages. Only then we can go a page further. Now we have our previous and the next functions implemented, and we're handling them on these buttons. So we have to go back to our component, and now we have to see what are we actually doing with this page. Think about it. We already implemented that, but we weren't using it. What we're doing is we're passing it into the useGetMovies query. If we go into it and check our useGetMovies right here, we are actually passing this page to every single request, which means that it should work. We should be able to switch the pages. So I'm going to go back to our application, reload the page, and scroll down. I'm gonna click next, and nothing happens. As a matter of fact, we do get an error. Total page is not defined. We have to go back to pagination, and that here is going to be total pages and not total page. Now, if we fix that, we can go ahead and click next. We see that nice loading, and we are on the second page. We can click next again, and we are on the third page. We can go ahead and click the fourth one. That also works. And finally, The most beautiful thing about Redux is that it keeps the data for all the previous requests that have been made. Meaning, if you go prev, there was no loading. It loaded immediately. Take a look. So now we can switch between those pages that we have loaded previously instantly. Great. And the same situation is with our genres. If I click top rated, you can see the loading. Upcoming, loading. And there's going to be a loading for every single new category that we click. But once we have visited the category already, we can simply switch between those instantly. And that's great. This is done automatically for you by Redux. With that said, we also need to use this pagination component inside of the actors page. So if we go to popular, free guy for example, Ryan Reynolds, we need to be able to show the pagination right here as well. So that's going to be inside of the actors, and we need to be able to display it just below our movies. So inside of here, I'm gonna say pagination and press Ctrl space to immediately import it. Use the second one, ... If it didn't do it for you, make sure you put it right next to this movie list, pagination from ... And what things do we have to pass into it? Well, we're gonna pass the current page, which is going to be set to page. Also the set page, and finally total pages is going to be equal to movies total underscore pages. Finally, so far we haven't yet implemented the page use state. So let's scroll up, and as you can see, we just have the page as a constant variable. We have to implement it using use state. So I'm going to delete this and use state. That's going to be page, and set page at the start it's going to be set to 1. Now we have everything that we need, and we're passing it to our pagination component, another component that we are reusing multiple times. Let's go ahead and save it and test it out. Our pagination appeared. I'm gonna click next, and there we go. The movies are loading and changing. Great. This part also works. So now that our pagination works both on the actors page and on all the other pages, we are done with the pagination part of this application. Great job on doing this as well, and I hope you learned how to do pagination in other projects as well. Basically, API allows us to pass a page variable. We're just changing that variable on the front end and then sending it to the API, which is then giving us our next 20 movies and so on. That part is now done. Great job, and I'll see you in the next lecture.